What do you think the chances are of winning the biggest event of the Pokemon season with a deck that is completely experimental, very bonkers, and was only built 24 hours ago? Oh, and you don't actually own the cards for it yet. And just to top it all off, your flight to the event just got cancelled. I would say the odds of winning that event are pretty low, right? Well, that wasn't going to stop Sander, who was against all odds, as he built the craziest deck in Pokemon history, and he shocked the Pokemon TCG world with it too, all on the highest of stages. Let's take a look at this previously untold story. Going into NAIC 2022, the format was pretty wide open, with there being about 10 different decks in day 2 of the previous regional, Milwaukee, which was just 2 weeks before. However, there were definitely 3 standout decks jostling for the best deck in format title. Palkia was most people's best deck. Palkia V-Star, having just been released in Astral Radiance, was already taking 30% of the day 2 metagame in Milwaukee, and a ridiculous 8 out of 8 top 8 slots in the Melbourne regionals. And to be fair, it's fairly easy to see why. Subspace Sorrel packed a huge punch for 2 energy, dealing 60 plus 20 damage for each bench Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. We've already seen this kind of attack have immense success this season with Suicune v Blizzard Rondo, which would deal 20 plus 20 for each bench Pokemon in play. However, Suicune did need to be paired with Ludicolo for that late game one-shot potential, which took up valuable deck space for all the stage 2 support like Rare Candy and Lotad for example. Palkia didn't need such a partner due to the beefed up damage output, already allowing you to hit V-Star Pokemon with both players having full benches and a choice belt attached. Make no mistake about it, Subspace Swell was a mad attack that could get even more mental when you consider it was only for 2 energy. This meant you could get a Palkia V-Star swinging out of nowhere if you was to use Melanie to attach 1 energy and then turn attach 1 from your hand too. Or you could even use any other supporter, to be honest with you, since Palkia V-Star Power Star Portal would allow you to attach 3 water energy from your discard pile to your water Pokemon in any way you like. This meant you could play a whole suite of other situational water type attackers to complement Palkia, since Palkia only really needed a Melanie and a water energy to get rolling. In Melbourne, we saw Starmie V get used. Its energy spiral attack would allow for some huge KOs out of nowhere if your opponent got a little lax with their energy attachments. Or really good for punishing Arceus V-Star players who typically played with a low bench size, so Subspace Well wouldn't hit that hard. But they did have a lot of energy in play after Trinity Nova. We even saw some of the Melbourne list playing Suicune too. However, it was one of the most innocent looking cards that packed one of the biggest of punches. Not only did Radiant Greninja allow you to discard an energy to draw 2 cards, providing an insane card draw throughout the whole game, and getting energy in a discard pile for Melanie and Star Portal, but you also had the attack Moonlight Shuriken that did 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. This would decimate evolving decks, like anything with an Inteleon engine, by taking out the Sobbles or even Drizzles before they could evolve up safely into Inteleon. But speaking of Inteleon, it was actually the main partner for Palkia, since it would give you a ton of reliable trainer search via the Shady Dealings ability, which would let you grab 1 trainer card when you evolved into Drizzle, or grab 2 trainer cards when you evolved up into Inteleon. Insane. Inteleon also doubled up as an attacker, with its Aqua Bullet dealing a respectable 120 damage to the active and 20 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. There was however another engine for Palkia. It was the Australian Turbo build, that opted to play Celebration's Mew to pluck out items when it was in the active via its Mysterious Tail ability. That variant did seem to wane in popularity a little bit coming into Milwaukee, but it was still capable of dealing a ton of damage. The biggest hurdle for Palkia decks were the suite of Arceus decks that were looking to make life as hard as possible. There were 3 main variants of Arceus that you had to watch out for. The most obvious Palkia counter was the Arceus V-Star Flying Pikachu VMAX deck. Arceus or Trinity Nova would allow you to accelerate 3 basic energy from your deck to your V Pokemon in any way you like, whilst dealing 200 or 180 damage after double turbo energy attachment. Couple this with the fact that Arceus attacks for strictly colorless energy, that means you could power up anything you like. In this case, Flying Pikachu VMAX for 3 energy did 160 damage via Max Balloon, which would perfectly KO an Arceus V-Star even if they had a big charm attached. But Max Bloom would also protect the Pikachu from any basic Pokemon damage next turn, which to be fair, can come in pretty handy. Arceus V-Star Power Star Birth also helped keep everything nice and consistent, since it allowed you to grab any 2 cards you like from your deck once per game. This meant you was never truly out the game because you could grab whatever you like. Arceus also saw a ton of play when paired with Duraludon V Max. This made life harder for Palkia in a different way, with a silly high amount of HP. With 360 HP with a big charm attached, and a strong 220 damage attack, this would make life very hard for Palkia. Since Arceus Duraludon would often only have 1 or 2 Pokemon in play, this meant Palkia could struggle to even 2-shot it. Combined with a ton of healing cards like Crystal Cave and Hyper Potion, Duraludon was a very scary deck. And that's all without mentioning its ability Skyscraper, which made itself immune to damage from Pokemon that had any special energy attached. This meant it was very good into other Arceus decks too. Arceus Inteleon was the last Arceus variant. This subbed out all other attackers for a very thick Inteleon line that would search out cards like Cheren's Care, which would completely heal a colourless Pokemon by returning it back to your hand. Path to the Peak turn off all box Pokemon abilities, which would slow down Palkia for example. And otherwise it would just be a very big irritant to the rest of the format. The third deck was Public Enemy number 1, we're talking of course about Mew V Max. Mew V Max was the very fast turbo deck of the format, being able to swing for 230 damage turn 1 via a combination of Meloetta, a Lesser Sparkle, and either Choice Belt or Power Tablet. Since Meloetta would swing for 70 damage for each Fusion Strike energy attached to your Pokemon. This meant if it was your first turn going second, you could attach 1 Fusion Strike energy from your hand to Meloetta, then use a Lesser Sparkle to get 2 more into play for a base 210 damage output. Meaning with 1 Choice Belt or Power Tablet, you was KOing 2 prized Pokemon on your first turn, giving you immense pressure. Power Tablets also allowed your Fusion Strike Pokemon to do an extra 30 damage for each one play. This meant if you used Techno Blast via Mew V Max and used 4 Power Tablets, you had the ability to remove anything from play, since Mew V Max would let you use any one of your Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks as this attack. Genesect V's Techno Blast wasn't the only reason to play Genesect though. It had a crazy ability Fusion Strike system, which would allow you to draw up to the amount of Fusion Strike Pokemon you had in play. This meant if you had no cards in your hand and 6 Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, you could draw 6 cards, and you could use multiple of these in a turn. This meant you could constantly refill your hand with all the combo pieces you needed to throw out some ridiculous damage. With all that being said though, it was an Arceus Duraludon deck that won the previous regionals in Milwaukee, and Sander, Mies and David all saw this. And they weren't planning on just going to NAIC, they were planning on doing some serious damage too. They all looked at the metagame and thought, let's come up with the nastiest control deck we can. Sander's previous invention, Umbreon VMAX Cheryl's Sun and Moon badge loop, took EUIC by storm. It was unique by looping Cheryl via Eldegoss's ability to return Cheryl back to your hand. You would use the attack float up to return the Eldegoss back to deck and all cards attached to it so you could never deck out. And Sun and Moon badge would prevent boss's orders from being played, so your opponent was stuck trying to one-shot an Umbreon VMAX who had a colossal amount of HP that was getting Cheryl healed every turn. If you couldn't break this Cheryl loop, the Umbreon would keep getting healed, making it impossible for you to win, and eventually you would deck out. However, this deck was well known to the community now, and they knew how to stop it. This meant the group had to change their deck ASAP if they wanted to do well. The group saw a Stonejourner VMAX deck on stream once, that would aim to utilize Training Core to return energy from the discard pile back to your hand, and Stone Gift to heal massive amounts of HP, all while using Team Meow's Cheer to loop supporters that they needed. This was pretty decent, but after testing a lot, the crew found out it had a terrible Mew VMAX matchup, so unfortunately it couldn't be taken seriously. It was only 2 days before their flight and they were feeling desperate, so they hopped onto PTCGO and typed in the word heal in the search bar, just to see if anyone had overlooked something. And to be honest, what they saw, well most of it at least, was bulk. Useless. However, there was one monster card that looked, well, seemingly impossible to play, but it did heal a very large amount of HP, enough to auto-win games if it was used successfully. That card the group stumbled onto was Mewtwo's head. Yep. That's right, just the head. You heard me correctly. Let me explain. So Pokemon, maybe with a little bit of inspiration from somewhere, had an idea by creating a card that was very hard to get onto the field, but when it does, it was absolutely game changing, capable of carrying the game on its own. Well, how did this mechanic work? Well, this was the V-Union mechanic, baby, where they had a Pokemon that was split into 4 different cards. And normally they gave it 4 attacks and maybe sometimes an ability too. A bit like the legend cards from the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. Except in order to get these ones into play, you had to get all 4 pieces in the discard pile. Then you could summon them, I guess, onto the bench, all 4 pieces in all its glory as one monstrous Pokemon. Now, to balance out this very convoluted way of getting them into play, all their attacks are crazy. For example, Zacian V-Union did 340 damage, capable of sending anything to the Shadow Realm. Greninja did 100 damage to all your opponent's bench Pokemon. And Mewtwo is capable of hitting 300 damage, first of all, a great number to deal with V-Star Pokemon. But it could also spread 160 damage via damage counters, which was great for stopping Sobble or any other evolution deck. But the main selling point that Mies, David and Sander were interested in was its super regeneration attack, which is capable of healing 200 damage, no drawback. And make no mistake about it, this was a big deal. A 200 heal is fully healing off an Arceus V-Star Trinity Nova, and it makes a mockery of Palkia's Subspace Swell as well. This alone was good enough for the group to start testing an initial base list. They wasn't feeling confident, but they wanted to try it out, and if it flopped, they could just keep it moving and try something else. A day before their flight, however, they were actually blown away with how well it handled the metagame. Consistency issues did plague the deck, however, and with the event being so close, they were really hesitant to actually commit to it, since these issues really needed a lot more time to work out. What were the crew going to do? However, Icelandic Airways of all people were at hand to help the lads out. Luckily for the lads, they already had their sleeves ready, and if you don't want to have to worry about sleeves ever again, make sure to check out this video sponsor Dragon Shield, link in the description, and make sure to use code BURST to get yourself a little bit of money off, and it supports me as well. Let me explain. You see, this was the summer of 2022, where airports all over the world were riddled with major staff issues and really feeling a pinch from increased holiday demands. This meant the group had a surprise 24-hour layover in Iceland, and this was a sign from Arceus themselves to test this deck, test it all day, iron out all the consistency issues, and that's what they did. Between them, they played over 100 games in that 24-hour window, and now the group were confident in the deck. They were committed to Mewtwo V-Union now. They were very excited. However, they now had another huge problem, and this one isn't solved very fast. And if they couldn't solve it, they 100% couldn't play Mewtwo. You see, the only way to get these Mewtwo V-Union cards was from an exclusive box. A box that was getting pretty old at this point. And with less than 24 hours to go into the event, they didn't really have a lot of time to try loads of shops in America when they landed. So they thought, and thought, and thought. And then they had a brilliant idea. A person from the group who they're going to stay with for the event said that they had found a shop in America that had 5 Mewtwo boxes in stock, and they also had a 24-hour shipping method. So the plan was for this person to put the order in to the hotel where the group were going to stay, while the rest of the group was still flying overhead to America. Now, in theory, this should work on paper, but it left no wiggle room whatsoever. If any minor thing went wrong, this could have disastrous consequences. Because bear in mind, at the time, Mewtwo V-Union was a bulk card. It's not the sort of thing players would be taking to events. So the crew crossed their fingers as they landed in America, praying that there would be no further delays or shipping delays. Since if everything worked perfectly, they only had a few hours spare to get their decks ready, get to sleep and prepare for the event. Luckily for them though, it all worked well. And it's safe to say that other players at NAIC were not prepared and were downright shocked by what they saw, punctuated with Mies getting a round 3 decimation on stream.
With the Miltank route, it's like okay, just not quite enough, especially when Mies has multiple Miltanks, has the scoop up nets, has the cape of toughness. So congratulations to Mies Brennickmeyer on getting the win here in round 3, starting 3-0 with a very unexpected deck, the Mewtwo V-Union.
This worked well for the group as the 4 of them all made day 2, absolutely terrifying the field. You see, it was really hard to deal with the versatility of Mewtwo V-Union, having healing at hand, a 300 damage attack, and an army of Celebrations Yveltal to discard energy, and Miltank to act as a backup if the Mewtwo was slow to come out. Sander, however, found himself in the top 8 bracket, where he matched Steven Varesco, playing Arceus Inteleon, which Mewtwo absolutely destroyed with its healing power, swiftly seeing him in the top 4. Only 2 rounds away from taking the whole event down with a deck they didn't even have in their hands a day ago. However, in top 4 they matched Azul, and Azul was playing a new deck, Arceus Flying Pikachu, which normally would be plain sailing for Sander. However, Azul played for Marnie. This is a devastating card for Sander to deal with, since he relies on the Snorlax Gourmandize ability, ending his turn to draw 7 cards while it's in the active. This leaves him vulnerable to Marnie, putting all the cards from the hand to the bottom of the deck and only giving him 4 cards to start the next turn. This makes it extremely hard to get those Mewtwo v Union pieces in the hand and then discarded. And unfortunately for Sander, Azul knew this, as he Marnied Sander out of game 1. In game 2, however, the army of Miltanks and Yveltal came in the clutch, buying just enough time for Mewtwo v Union to come out at the end for a massive 6 prize size explosion. Oh my goodness.
And now when
it's time!
Mewtwo v Union! Let's go!
We finally saw the energy coming up from the Silene, and that means that these energies are going to make their way onto the board by way of Union gain. Mewtwo v Union, not threatened by this Crobat VMAX.
Recognizing there is no darkness energy, after enough damage has been compiled via route onto these Mewtwo VMAX, we could see the psychic spread damage come through. 16 damage counters spread onto your opponent's Pokemon. Has to pass. The Miltank is still stranded in the office. Scoop up net brings the Mewtwo v Union back into the active.
Oh, let's go to math class. I think this is going to be a lot of damage. We have the 16. We have 6 to the active, 7 to the back. I think that will clear all of these Pikachu VMAX from play. And that is going to be a great way to close out game 2.
Sander taking the remaining 4 prize cards all at once. Azul was not able to get there here in game 2.
Putting it all down to a crazy game 3 win or go home scenario. However, unfortunately for Sander, his luck ran out, as some very bad prize cards and top cut rules favouring attacking decks over control decks left him really out of luck, as Azul got the victory after time was called.
Oh, I think that the players understand what just happened here. Sander's going to fall just a little bit short with one of the most impressive decks we have ever seen on the international stage. What a surprise, what a treat. But in the end, it is going to be Azul Garcia Griego making his way to the finals here at the North American International Championships.
And actually went on to win the whole event as well. But regardless of that, top 4 with a deck that, well, wasn't a deck 2 days ago, where no one had the cards for it, and was only possible due to an airplane delay, is still an incredible achievement. And Mewtwo v Union will go down as one of the gutsiest surprise decks ever created in Pokemon TCG history. If you like that video, like the video, and why don't you watch this video here, where we go through the complete history of the Pokemon TCG metagame.